Welcome to But Are There Dragons, a podcast where two friends pick a book at least one of them has not read and work their way through it a few chapters at a time. I'm your host, Kritter.
And I'm your host, Jess.
And we're continuing this adventure with The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, with me as the resident Lord of the Rings veteran.
And me as a Lord of the Rings first-timer.
In this, our fourth episode of Season 2, we're going to discuss chapters 7 through 9. Before we dive in, Jessica, how are you feeling?
Excited. So, Tom Bombadil is a complete unknown, so I can't wait to dive into all things Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, so I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but was this your first introduction to Tom Bombadil?
It was. So Tom Bombadil is, this urban myth for me, that he's really important to the story, but I never tuned into why. Mostly because when all of that was happening, it was mostly just to poo-poo the movies. Like, how could you have a movie without Tom Bombadil in it? And I, at that age, could not care less. I was like, even then, I had no use for book cloaks, it turns out. So... I just was like, this is not anything that matters to me. I'll be able to, if anything, I'll be able to enjoy the movies without anything like that weighing me down. This is going to be awesome. But over the years, as I've gotten, a little bit more like, hey, I'd really like to know what I'm missing out on. Part of that also is I'd really like to know what this Tom Bombadil dude is all about.
Who is this character? Okay, well, I'm really excited to talk about him, but before we dive in, I also, we're adding a personal touch. Yeah. So how are things going with you, outside of the Lord of the Rings?
Things are good. I am focusing on all kinds of fun adventures that are going to come once the weather changes to ignore that it's January. How about you?
I am getting on an early morning flight tomorrow to go to New Orleans. So that is something that I am very much looking forward to. We're recording this on a Thursday, but it is my Friday because I'm not working tomorrow and I'm feeling pretty great, honestly. Really good, jazzed for the weekend ahead of me. So
amazing.
I know. I love to travel. So I'm very much looking forward to the weekend. But that's all. Yeah. So let's get into the book. We are on book 1, chapter 7, In the House of Tom Bombadil. So the hobbits enter into Tom Bombadil's house and are greeted by Goldberry, daughter of the river. Any thoughts, musings, or things that stood out to you about the hobbits' interactions with her?
She seems pretty dreamy. There's just something that smacks of a glamour or something very fantabulous about her without any negative, So, last time we talked about a glamour was about a certain dragon named Smaug. So not that kind of glamour, like a nicer glamour, a friendlier, cozier glamour. Okay,
so her nature is a matter of some speculation. So if you had to put her into a box, well, not like literally, but like what kind of a being do you think she is now that you've met her?
I really thought that she would be like a woodland sprite of some kind, like some kind of being of the forest, obviously with the water being very important. Right up to, he brings her water lilies and she has them all displayed at her feet. Very much like, I'm going to go real deep, okay? There's a movie even older. There's a movie reference I'm going to make that's even older. There's an old movie with Tom Hanks called Splash. With Daryl Hannah, who is a mermaid. And that was the vibe I got. Was like, she's from the water and she can't be too far from the water. And so he brings her water lilies to be around her feet to help keep her feel connected to the water somehow.
Okay, I love that. I think the thing that I latched onto when I was kind of researching, because I was like, okay, what does the world think she is? And again, it's a matter of some speculation, but they said that it feels like kind of an homage to the mythos in a lot of places, including like the UK, of like a river goddess or like a river spirit. You know what I mean? And to me, I was like, that totally tracks. That checks out. I like that, especially because it felt like she was controlling like the rain almost, it was like, oh, it's her washing day and it just so happens to be raining a lot. and stuff like so. Yeah, it was. She's very water adjacent, and calling her the daughter of the river, you put two and two together, and you get water goddess, river goddess.
Absolutely. I could totally see that. Yeah. I did not Google because I am afraid.
Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't Google at all. I'm not
Googling.
Every now and then I'm like, I've read this before. I want to see what other people think. And that's the one that I was like, no, yeah, that checks out for me. So a couple times while the hobbits are in the house, they inquire into the nature of Tom Bombadil. Goldberry calls him the master and describes him as fearless. Tom described himself as eldest, here before the river, trees, the first raindrop, here before the men, the little people, the elves, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. All very cryptic. What do you make of it?
I mean, I don't, right? So
yeah,
that was a lot. So both of those snippets wound up in my notes because I was just trying to highlight wherever he talks about. At first, the first time they ask Goldberry who Tom is, she just says he is. So,
okay.
And then she goes on. I will also say that master was capitalized. Eldest was also capitalized, but it happened to be the beginning of a sentence. So it was very sus. So I found that interesting in just a very sideline. I just kind of noticed it thing. I don't know what to think, especially based on the world as I understand it so far. I mean, he could very well be a creature that is that old, but I thought that the only thing that was that old, currently at least my understanding, only involves elves. And he says he predates the elves.
The elves. Right. So
I don't know, man.
He's giving God too, especially whenever there's this interaction where Tom asks for the ring. He wants to see the ring. And Frodo, first of all, was just able to give it to him, which he was not supposed to be able to do, right? Like Gandalf said, no one willingly gives up the ring. Gandalf tried to give it to Gandalf, or that was his intent, and then he just couldn't. But, toss it over to Tom, no problem, which surprised him. And then Tom puts it on his finger and doesn't disappear.
I was shouting at my Kindle. I was just like, but how?
Yep. And then Frodo gets it back and he's like, is this my ring? Like, what's going on? Was that some kind of trick to steal it? Obviously, he's kind of paranoid because he's under the influence of the ring. And he puts it on just to test it. And Tom can see him, even though everybody else can't. And I did note that nothing seemed to happen other than him turn invisible, right? And so it's even though Gandalf's don't put on the ring, don't put on the ring, man, he does it and nothing bad happens. And so I'm like, is that because he's under Tom's little safety blanket, or what's going on here? That man is powerful.
Yeah, I feel like Tom's magical in whatever capacity he is, that he predates the elves, for Pete's sake, that Goldberry is magical, and therefore their home has to be a magical Switzerland. I don't know. I feel as though their house is a bastion of safety in at least some regard.
That's what it feels like. And they even said that, right? No evil comes here, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, but why not just stay there? If Tom's not faced by the ring and no evil can come there, then that feels like a good spot to hole up. But I guess not. I guess it can only last for so long. So they sleep there. They stay there for a little while. Frodo, once again, had some more odd dreams, including a white-haired figure on a tower being borne away on an eagle with the evil things below, and horse hooves galloping. So before, you thought that his dreams were connected to the ring somehow. Do you maintain that opinion?
I do. So, unfortunately, my movie knowledge stepping in, I think that this is a vision of Saruman, although the mighty eagle definitely threw me off a little bit. So to me, this sounded like Saruman, and then maybe the ring is showing him things that are happening with, the Dark Lord, the enemy's forces. So more like a Harry Potter Voldemort thing where it's as
see what's
opposed
happening.
to my first take. I think what I actually said is I think the ring is telling him to go to this tower. Now I'm more like maybe the ring is just giving him glimpses of what's happening on the other side of the forces.
Yeah, like that Sauron would be aware of. See, I thought it was Gandalf. Like, even though it said white hair, but then he was borne away on an eagle, and I was like, well, we've seen the movies. Like, that's how he gets away. It's flying on an eagle.
Maybe so. I still think of Gandalf as the gray.
I know. Like, so I guess the question is, now I'm trying to remember how he's been physically described. Like, does he have a gray hat and a gray cloak, but white hair, or does he have gray everything? Right. So,
I don't know.
Because
is it movie indoctrination? Like I'm
maybe.
just picturing that because of the movies.
In my head, no eagle would be like, yeah, Saruman, hop on, buddy. You know what I mean?
And that's kind of what I thought too. But again, I'm like, I gotta try and keep the movie bias at bay where I can.
No, that's a good call. Like, that's a good call because I wouldn't think of Gandalf as white-haired either. And now I need to go back and see if that's how he was described.
Yeah.
All right, so Tom eventually sends them off, right? He's like, okay, let's do this with a song that they knew to sing if ever they were in danger. And that ends chapter 7. Any final thoughts?
I had a couple. So first off, they broke into song. Like it was just easier for them to talk to their hosts in song, like a musical. I found like that just struck me as funny.
Yeah.
And then as they were resting by the fire after Goldberry, I believe, had gone up, Tom is telling them a story about basically, I believe, how he and Goldberry came to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And that he goes and gets water lilies for her every year. And then there's a twinkle in his shiny blue eye. And basically, I'm paraphrasing terribly. It would be the last time they leave the house until the spring was how it read to me. Mm-hmm. So they were extremely lucky that he was even passing through to get those lilies because he wouldn't normally be going through there anymore.
Yeah.
To save them from Old Man Willow. So that was kind of wild.
Yeah, it feels very Taviran, which
yes.
if you read the Wheel of Time, it's like the pattern of reality shaping itself around you essentially to like further the plot. Basically is what's happening, and that's kind of, it does feel a bit like it's like Elrond looking at Bilbo's map on the exact right day to see the secret code, the moon runes or whatever. It's the same vibe. So just a really nice coincidence. Sure. That's what happened. Yeah, for sure.
And then, so everybody, even though Goldberry and Tom had both told them all that they're safe, everybody had bad dreams that was attacked by Old Man Willow. So Sam is the only one who wasn't attacked by Old Man Willow, and he slept like a log.
Good for him.
So that was kind of neat. That's still... I'm so sorry. I'm going through the part where I was freaking out because Tom can touch the ring. Tom knows Farmer Maggot. Of course.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember
Tom
if that
knows
happened.
Farmer Maggot.
I couldn't remember if that happened in this chapter or chapter 8, but and he respects that guy, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
because he knows what he's talking about.
He knows what's up.
And then Barrow-wights. So Barrow-wights, I had a moment because I was like, I don't know what a barrow is. Mm-hmm. So I looked up 2 words in this chapter, barrow and penthouse. Because I was like, I'm pretty sure that when you say penthouse, you don't mean the same thing that I mean. Mm-hmm. Turns out, no. It's, a house with a slanted roof.
Oh, who knew?
Yep.
Who knew?
And then, so Barrow-wights, I'm like, are those zombies? Do we have zombies? It sounds like zombies. So that's all I wrote as zombies?
Question mark?
Question mark?
I guess we'll see. In book 1, chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. So to open the chapter, we get a beautiful description. Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. So, this is a perfect example of something that was included in the movies, but in a totally different context, right? So Gandalf said this in Return of the King when he's talking to, I believe it's Pippin. Yeah, it's Pippin. So we also had some lines from Tom Bombadil taken by Treebeard in the movies, right? The dig deep, drink water, go to sleep thing.
So there was another one from last chapter too that we can put a pin in, but I was like, I think that this got said, and I want to ask you, because you can look it up to see if it was said in some iteration.
Right. So now that you're witnessing the original, right? How do you feel about things being recycled in different ways for the movies?
I mean, I might be a little bit of a weirdo. I'm glad, because I think that the power of the prose is so good that I'm just glad that they found other ways to incorporate so directly from the source material. And I can't speak to it because I haven't noticed every single time by any means, and we're certainly not done. But I have yet to see it happen in an instance that seems to make it less or not fit. You know what I mean? It seems to be done, respectfully, as any adaptation you hope would be.
Yeah. This one in particular, I've always loved the way that Sir Ian McKellen delivers that line. It's like this goosebump inducing because he's talking about what it was like to die, essentially, right? And it's like Pippin's like, well, that's not so bad or whatever. And so the way that they gave it to him, perfect idea, because this wasn't a line of dialogue at all in the books. It just was a description. And it also made me interested in like, you know, I guess in the sense that what Frodo was seeing was heavenly, right? In this house of Tom Bombadil. I don't know. There's just like a lot of, I agree with you that I think recycling this language was the perfect idea because losing any of it is a tragedy. But obviously in adaptations, things have to change. And so preserving it and honoring it by like inserting it where it fits. Love that. Peter Jackson, you nailed it. Amen.
Yeah.
Do you. Like,
yes.
I love you. Thank you for your service, Peter Jackson.
Yes.
So let's see. Where did I end up? Okay, so after some traveling, the hobbits rest next to a tall stone where they accidentally fall asleep. The plan was to get past the Barrow Downs before nightfall, but their little nap got in the way of that. There was a ton of fog, and though they tried to make their way out together, they eventually got separated. Frodo was confronted by a tall figure with glowing eyes and a frozen grip, and he lost consciousness. So I feel like this particular scene inspired so many other authors. Robert Jordan and She Who Must Not Be Named, to name a couple. How did you feel about it? Did you like recognize this in other works that you've read, or, you know, the creepiness factor? How did it work for you?
Oh, I mean, it worked for me, honestly. In the moment I was paying attention to what was happening, it didn't even occur to me. But no, it was a great jump scare. I was honestly too busy being so disappointed in them. Like you guys couldn't be cool for one day.
Yeah. You don't think just a giant rock standing alone by itself is sus in any way.
Had one job, stay on the grass, kind of like stay on the path. And you couldn't be cool for one day. No, but it really was very impressive. And I guess I really should be thinking about things like that as I'm reading, but turns out, no.
That's okay. You know, sometimes I just get pinged by certain things. And I'm like, okay, a bunch of fog rolling out and then separating the party. That sounds like something that happens in the Eye of the World. And then it's like these figures that have like, they like chill you to your bone and like whatever, you know, there's just multiple. I feel like people took, and maybe Tolkien took that from other people that came before him, but there's just enough of it in this one scene that I was like, man, other people really liked this scene, or at least remembered it. Somehow it got buried in their conscious that
Yeah, I
they.
mean, I have a hard time. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know because I'm not a scholar. I'm not a little literary historian or anything. I can't imagine anybody else in storytelling using this particular convention because it's so specific, to like that fantasy genre, and I know that
Yeah.
it is because of
Yes.
foundational works like this, but
Mm-hmm.
still.
Still, yeah, good scene. And again,
Mhm.
there's another thing to be said about how Tolkien is so good at changing tone, right? We're in this brightly colored, beautiful, happy place where we're singing songs and telling old stories with Tom Bombadil.
Mhm.
And then, like, just like that, we are in a terrifying place where you can't find your friends and you can hear them in the distance. And then all of a sudden, you're all trapped and probably going to die.
Yeah.
Just like that. So were you scared? Like, do you think, well, obviously you knew that wasn't going to be it for them, but how were, like, trying to suspend what you knew
Mhm.
outside of the books? Like, how were you feeling for the hobbits at this moment?
I mean, it was good. I feel as though the suspense was there. The Barrow-wights, this is not material that I've ever heard of, so it was
Mm-hmm.
all fresh for me in that perspective. I thought the suspense was real and very good. And how really just a few elements can completely disorient you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take much to make you feel separated and alone. And I
Yeah.
think that amps up the suspense and is just really well done in this particular interaction.
Yeah, agreed. So the hobbits were taken by the Barrow-wights. Frodo was the only one conscious and, like Bilbo in Mirkwood, briefly considered abandoning his friends and escaping on his own. First of all, though, in this instance, like, who could blame him?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously. But he rejected the thought. Ultimately, he called for Tom with Tom's special song, and Tom came to rescue them. Any standout moments or thoughts about this encounter?
That, finally Frodo remembers the rescue song, that it was really um kind of fast, uh
Yeah.
that Tom came along.
Mm-hmm. Almost
Magical
instantaneous.
even. Yeah.
Very magical. Yeah.
And then so I can't, of course, my notes, why do I even bother? One of them, upon waking, says the men of Carn Doom came on us at night. I can't remember if it was Merry or Pippin.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kinds of things that I've kind of been highlighting, maybe not necessarily commenting on, but highlighting because it's clearly setting up kind of, there's lots of nuggets over the next few chapters that talk about the roots of the places that they're traveling through
Mm-hmm.
and how they seem to align with how the enemy has traversed this land before. So when I see things like that, I kind of highlight them uh, almost like pieces of a puzzle, right? That I might be able to hopefully push all the edges together and make it make sense later on.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's this art that I found about this. I talk about, like, I have a TikTok where I explain Tom Bombadil that I posted a long, long time ago. But when I was looking for art to use, there's this one that's got this, like, giant hand, like the skeletal looking hand, creeping up on these, like, dead looking hobbit bodies. Right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
so creepy. So the zombie arm or whatever imagery was strong, I think, in the particular scene. It was pretty
Yeah.
terrifying. And then also, I thought it was interesting, and I had forgotten this, that the hobbits are, like, decked out in, like, jewels and crowns. It's like this
Yeah.
ritualistic sacrifice kind of thing. And I was just so intrigued by, like, what are these wights doing? Like, what's the plan
Well, it
here?
felt very sacrificial to
It
me.
did,
Like
yeah.
it felt very not that I know a lot about traditions from other cultures, but like I thought of, Egyptians, that they deck them out a certain way and
Yeah.
leave them with offerings. That was the kind of thing that made me think of.
Yeah. Yeah. So the imagery was just funny, like weird,
Mm.
scary, creepy, and funny, where it's this skeletal hand and these hobbits all
Mm.
bejeweled and Frodo trying to reach for a sword. Like, I gotta get out of here.
So I have a question that
Okay.
I'm not asking for a spoiler, I swear.
Okay.
But to your knowledge, do we ever find out who Tom Bombadil is?
No. It's a matter of much speculation.
Dang it. Okay.
To this day, people wonder.
Okay. What about Goldberry?
No. Both. Many speculated. At least we get some of their like backstory, I think, in like other places. Maybe a little. I think there's like a poem or something in the Book of Lost Tales or something like that, but it doesn't explain their nature more than what we've already had. So we're almost done with this chapter. The last thing I had for this chapter was, well, first of all, I love that the hobbits each got ornate daggers long enough to count as swords for them because they deserved something. But then also, Tom led them out of the Bear Downs and directed them to the prancing pony in Bree. Frodo reminded them all that they would need to call him Mr. Underhill once they got there, and they headed that way. Any thoughts for the end of the chapter?
I had a couple notes. So in addition to where I said the men of Carn Doom came on us at night, I had a couple. Also, sorry. Wind it back. Tom breaks the spell of the mound apparently by like leaving out the stuff, which is wild, and then gives them each a long leaf-shaped dagger. Found that relevant. Seems like hobbits get armaments when they leave town.
Yep. As they should.
And then I took note of it saying the men of Westerness were foes of the Dark Lord, but they were overcome by the evil king of Carn Doom, which also kind of tied into that earlier throwaway comment. So again, just more kind of lore about the area, but I took note of it. And then my last thing is that Tom is very Gandalf-like in the having of secrets and the knowing of things.
And being so cryptic. Just wildly cryptic. Come on, Tom. Okay. Well, moving on to the final chapter of this episode. Chapter 9 of Book 1, At the Sign of the Prancing Pony. So Bree is a rare place where hobbits and men coexist. As they approached the gate, the hobbits were confronted by a watchman, but they were eventually let in. Behind them, though, a dark figure crawled over the gate and melted into the shadows. At this moment, did you have a guess as to who or what that was?
No, I was just like, who dis? Who dis?
What's happening?
And then, of course, I was like, is the gatekeeper sketchy or am I just paranoid now?
Both. No, like, I don't know.
Tell. Am I paranoid? Is the narrator paranoid? Is somebody paranoid? I don't know.
Well, I think Frodo was definitely paranoid because he's like, you know, our business is our own. Essentially, like, if I hear that, I'm like, okay, now I have to know your business. Like, spill the tea.
But also, so there's a little bit of contrast there, you know, between how kind of it feels like Frodo is less naive than Bilbo was.
Yeah. No, he's more cautious.
He's definitely more cautious. He's definitely more suspicious. And you know, again, that added context of the rings had 17 more years to have effect on him to whatever extent it does. You know, I'm not saying he's being cool about it by any means. But he's not just out there blabbing his details either, which shows a little bit more worldliness than one might expect from somebody who has never left the Shire until now. Yeah,
I do think that the movies have kind of clouded my knowledge of Frodo, because so many times in these books, or in this book in particular, Frodo will be, you know, getting the attention and respect of the people that the whole party is addressing, right? And they'll single him out in certain ways, and he says some things that seem very like wise and, you know, like gentlemanly, right? And I'm not saying that like Elijah Wood's Frodo wasn't a gentleman, but he was much more innocent and like young,
young.
Yeah, and so it's just, I think book Frodo is a different Frodo, like so far, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. I also thought there was a throwaway comment about there was Bree blood in the brandy bucks. So again, sort of like the Hobbit lore and how those lines are a little blurry, and I think that's really interesting. Even at the end of last chapter, Mary made a comment about sometimes his people ride out to Bree now and again. So, you know, there's some town lines being crossed. For sure.
For sure. And I also think it's funny because I think somewhere it said that it's like a day's ride from the ferry, like the Buckleberry ferry, I think, to Bree. Like the amount of stuff that the hobbits went through between Buckland and Bree is extent. I mean, they had to go through the forest, right? And it was like miserable. So I actually opened the book up to consult the map just to be like, so why did they do what they did? Obviously, it was to stay off the road, but the road it does like skirt right over the forest, basically. And so they they took the hard way, poor guys.
It definitely did not work out for them.
Well, I mean, it did, but it didn't. It was pretty rough.
Sure.
So they met the innkeeper, Butterbur, and had a nice supper. Afterwards, Sam, Frodo, and Pippin decided to head to the common room, and Merry decided to do his own thing. So in horror movies, I always lament when protagonists decide to split up. Did this make you nervous?
Well, I wrote, but Merry doesn't want to go down. Isn't that interesting? That Merry doesn't want to be social. So I don't know that I bemoaned it or anything, but I definitely took note of it and was like, why are you not being social?
Paranoia is over here like, Merry, are you
Merry,
a bad
what are you
guy?
up to?
Merry.
I am super paranoid. These books have already, we're only on the second one, and I'm already paranoid. But I do think it's interesting. And again, it's much like you just said that book Frodo and movie Frodo are totally different. This is another moment where book Merry and movie Merry feel very different, because movie Merry and Pippin to me wouldn't be separated and would never miss a chance to go to the common room.
1,000%. Yeah, they are proving the more we get to know them, the more different they are, in my opinion.
And that's okay. And I know that none of us are dealing in absolutes, and that doesn't mean that there aren't seeds of the truth in that. It just was really noticeable for me when I read it.
Yeah, same. So I would have gone the common room route. Like, sounded like a really good time. Pippin, Sam, and Frodo are just having an amazing little jaunt down there. But then they notice, or at least Frodo notices, a mysterious stranger in the corner, known in those parts as Strider, one of the rangers out of the east, in long, supple boots, smoking an odd pipe with a glint in his eyes and shaggy dark hair flecked with gray. So how do you feel about Strider's introduction? Other than understandably aroused, probably. At least me. I
can neither confirm nor deny. However, it did get hot in here.
A little bit.
So I thought that it was great. I thought it was an incredible introduction. I think that, honestly, there was a lot of the imagery that the movie evoked for me, right? So the movie,
they nailed
as I've mentioned in other episodes, the movies really helped me with visualizing the action as it's happening. And so I felt like this was really well represented on the screen. I was able to kind of take that as a one-to-one, which was all the more surprising when Frodo went right over to him.
It's not like, who's this stranger? And then he looks at him suspiciously. He's like, who's this stranger? I'm going to go talk to him.
Yeah. So it took me off guard just a little bit, but I got over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty weird. So Frodo's over with Strider, just kind of introducing himself or whatever. Meanwhile, Pippin is killing it with the locals. But as he moves to the tail of Bilbo's party, Strider encourages Frodo to do something to stop Pippin from giving away the whole disappearing act thing, which might evoke the Baggins name, which might start getting people wondering who these hobbits really are. So Frodo stands on a table, gives a little speech about, the camaraderie between the Shire and the Breelanders, and at the request of the crowd, sings a very long and absurd song. So he gets a little cocky, does a little dance at some point, and then he falls off the table and vanishes. Right. Pandemonium. Chaos. Thoughts or standout moments from this sequence?
It's kind of like a reverse gotcha, because the first time he wanted to go for the ring, he resisted. And I was like, ooh, maybe this is going to be different. Maybe he's not going to wear it. And then he does the Hey Diddle Diddle song that goes on forever.
Ages. ages. And like he's
Um,
like, when he jumps, it's like the cow jumped over the moon or something, which becomes
yes.
relevant later. But yeah.
Yes. And so, and then the ring slips on. And so it was kind of, like I said, just a little bit of a reverse gotcha. I was like, oh, maybe that's not what's going to happen because, doesn't have to be the same. And then it does happen. And the other part is the internal monologue for him where he feels like the ring tricked him.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that, which obviously we don't get that in a movie form. That's simply in the written form. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. In the movie, we get him holding his hand up and the ring like weirdly kind of like magnetically landing on his finger, right? But Frodo never questions that after the fact that we can see, at least, as to like, was that an accident? I also noted before this even happened that Frodo, somebody asked why he was in Bree or whatever, and Frodo gave an excuse that he was thinking of writing a book and he had interest in history and geography. So that's another little tidbit that reminded me of a certain character in The Eye of the World who gives a very similar excuse for being somewhere that they otherwise wouldn't be. So anyways, obviously it's not like a direct connection necessarily, but I keep reading these things and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this tiny little piece is so much like this other thing. And then after Frodo falls and disappears or whatever, there was a swarthy, mocking Breelander and a shifty Southerner both leaving right away. And this got me tense. Did you notice that? Did you think these are bad
absolutely.
guys?
I was like, these people are clearly up to no good. And then my last note was just that now Frodo even begins to suspect Butterbur, and then next to it I wrote, is the ring in fact making him more suspicious?
I was thinking the same thing. Like whenever he was talking to the gate guard and he's like, obviously he's being cautious, but he was almost being defensive rather than cautious. And I did wonder if that was the ring affecting him.
Basically, I'm just going to be questioning Frodo's motives for everything. That's what I figured out.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I don't know that I'm going to believe that we really, truly know the real Frodo. Because I feel like everything he does is like, oh, definitely the ring. So both Strider and Butterbur solicit Frodo for a private chat before the night was up. And so we go into the end of the chapter and episode not knowing exactly what those chats are to be about. Any final thoughts before we pick an MVP?
Final thoughts, excited like I was at the beginning. And a little wary. There is enough different here. The tension is building. The danger is definitely building. And I'm cautious, because I feel like the potential to have to flee the prancing pony is very high right now.
Yeah.
And, Butterbur, I don't know anything about him, so I really don't know what to expect. I obviously have some preconceived notions about what to expect from Strider.
Yeah, what was I was just thinking something and it literally just vanished. Oh, no, I get it. Okay, so like from so far in their flight from the Shire, they've been very much kind of alone, right? So they've met gate guards and they met up with Fatty and stuff like that, but like they've never been in a very populated scenario. And this was the first one and they totally botched it, which I thought was so funny, especially because Frodo's the one that's trying to like prevent people from messing it up and he's the one that messes it up, or the ring. So yeah, I was nervous immediately. Like, why? Like, if you are being chased, why are you in a populated? Like, I would avoid attention, which honestly was Sam's instinct, because he was like, why don't we just go see a hobbit? Like, see if they'll put us up for the night or whatever. And they're like, well, let's go to the end. It doesn't matter. So that was an interesting. That was our first heavily populated scene, basically, and it did not work out.
Yeah, and they did not nail it.
They did not nail it. They botched it. So we've got a new tradition where we pick an MVP from the chapters that we've read for each episode. Cue the music. Jessica, who would you name as your MVP this episode?
Okay. So for episode 4, based on completely arbitrary criteria that I make up on the fly every time.
Yeah.
I vote Goldberry.
Oh, okay.
I know that it's real easy to pick Tom.
Wow.
You know, because he's flashy, you know, seems to be
okay.
coming in and saving stuff. But I feel like Goldberry is his peer, and that you touched on something earlier about her potentially controlling the rain and stuff, and that's definitely a vibe I got. And so I don't think Tom is the only one that was doing things on their behalf.
Okay.
So, and that just lets me rationalize that I loved Goldberry and she was magnificent, and so I want to pick her.
This is your choice. You get to pick whoever you want. So, even though this is apparently the basic B answer, I'm going to pick Tom. Because Tom Bombadil did save their lives.
Again.
He is also, again, and I didn't pick him last episode. And I'm not going to say it's because I knew I would pick him this episode, because that would be cheating.
But you're not saying that.
I'm not saying that. But yeah, I think he is, I remember being so annoyed by him as a kid, because he was very lyrical. He was cryptic. I didn't fully understand what his deal was, and honestly, I still don't. But I found it to be much more interesting and intriguing this time, rather than annoying. And also, every single episode I have to mention Andy Serkis, but Andy Serkis doing his dialogue made him so much more bearable. Instead of trying to just read it and like attribute whatever kind of Tom Bombadil vibe,
he was doing whatever Tom he wants.
Yeah,
he's not trying to be true to somebody else's performance.
No, and I don't know if he like consulted with the musician or what, but the way that he did the sing-songy voice is so fun and goofy that I didn't mind it as much than I did when I was like literally just trying to read it on the page. So, big fan of Tom Bombadil in this adult read. And also, I just love the visual of him like opening a portal, or like you know, skipping across the land, but instead of doing a normal skip, he's taking like miles at a time. You know what I mean? Because like, how did he get there so fast? I just love how magical he is, and yeah, and just goofy, and like, you know, he comes in and he just shoos the Barrow-wights away like they're no big deal. I don't know. Like, I aspire to be Tom Bombadil. And so, yeah, I love that Goldberry and Tom both got shout outs in the MVP section.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, that's it for our episode this week. And so we would ask you guys and gals and everybody else to read for next week chapters 10 through 12, which will take us through the end of book 1, if that is how your book is broken up. And so that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 4 of season 2 of But Are There Dragons, brought to you by your hosts, me, Jessica Sadai, and Kritter XD. Please don't forget to follow us at But Are There Dragons on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, or at But Dragons just one T on X.
But Dragons Pod just one T.
But Dragons Pod just one T. Good catch. You can also find us on social media as Kritter XD and Shelf Indulgence. That's it for today. We are still workshopping new catchphrases for season 2. So let us know on social media how you feel about this one. As Tom says, keep to the green grass. Don't you go a-meddling with old stone or cold whites or prying in their houses, unless you be strong folk with hearts that never falter. Bye. So
I've been needing to yawn forever, so like give me like a few minutes, yeah. A few minutes. Give me a few seconds. Oh yeah, that felt good. Okay, little drinky drink. Welcome to But Are There Dragons, a podcast where two I spit and then lost all train of thought. Okay, let's try that again. Welcome to But Are There Dragons, a podcast where two friends pick a book at least one of them has not read and work their way through. Everything's fine. We're fine.